Welcome, dear friends, to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery, and welcome to everyone who tunes in to this later. I'd like to begin by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. So today I've chosen to speak on the topic of joy, happiness, on the spiritual path, happiness in our lives, and the causes of happiness, and in a way the ways in which we may think that we're pursuing happiness, and then we can find ourselves disappointed. And so this is a really important topic, I feel, because we're programmed, our conditioning is such that we will very naturally seek happiness and follow the happiness that we feel. So we're directed in this way. We seek happiness, we seek to escape from suffering, and this is our natural state. And of course the Buddha utilized this phenomenon in order to seek the ultimate happiness, which is freedom from any kind of suffering, the freedom of nibbana. And we often, a lot of us, particularly those of us who are not born Buddhist or into any guiding kind of religion or culture that helps us to live skillfully, oftentimes we can feel quite confused because we're seeking happiness quite naturally, and we can be very disappointed and disillusioned because we're perhaps encouraged to seek happiness in material things, acquisitions, getting this, getting that, getting the best model, getting the updates, getting the latest of whatever it may be. Or we might get the message from society, from our culture, that happiness is to be found in success. If I do well in some way, if I can get the right sort of job, ideally a job that I actually want to do, that I feel I might enjoy doing, but even people will sometimes seek livelihoods that are simply objects for status, for wealth, for success, and not necessarily even enjoyable pastimes. But there is this encouragement from society, even to some extent from our education systems, to seek success, seek worldly success, seek success in terms of wealth, in terms of status in society. So people are encouraged, aren't they, to, get a good job and earn, and then, you'll be happy because you can get what you want and need. You can raise a family, you can have a nice home, and so on. And this is all very kind of, you could say, understandable. It makes sense to a degree. But is it common sense? Is it really the right way to find our happiness, to find our joy? And it can be, if all goes well, for moments of time, periods of time, we can rest and enjoy and lean into our success and our wealth and our status. But as we know from the Buddha's teachings, these sources of a degree of happiness, of fleeting happiness, they are liable to change. They are therefore insecure. You know, we can reap the benefits for a while in terms of happiness and well-being, but inevitably these worldly indicators of happiness are vulnerable, liable to change. They're not going to last for us. One way or another, they're going to come to an end. They may come to an end through some change in the culture, the circumstances, you know, through war, through upheavals, through climate change. You know, a lot of people nowadays are getting flooded out of their homes, aren't they? Or getting burned out of their homes. And, you know, we might think we're safe where we live, but then we keep on hearing about weather phenomena striking in all different places, unexpected places. We really aren't able to be sure where in the world we could possibly live that's not going to be subject to some kind of catastrophe due to climate change. And then there's the human element of conflict and political upheavals, and even, as I said, wars, where we can lose everything, including our lives. And even if we're not subject to any kind of catastrophe in this way, well, we have the catastrophe of approaching old age, sickness, and death. And so here we are, you know, living a life where we're seeking happiness, we're maybe finding happiness in worldly terms, only to find that these bodies let us down. You know, we can't maintain our youth, our health, our vigor, and eventually we succumb, you know, to sickness or to old age, and we have to let it all go because in the end, this body will die. So that can be a source of great suffering if we are invested in worldly sources of happiness, of course. That can be a great trauma for us when eventually we have to part with our wealth, with our status, with our possessions, and even with our body itself, this body, which is, of course, not ours. All these things are not ours. All these things, because of their changeable nature, that we can't hold on to them and make them mine, make them part of me, you know. Even the body, never mind the worldly possessions, they were never ours. They could never possibly belong to us. We can't own land. We can't own houses. We can't own animals. We can't own possessions. It's simply impossible because these are out of our control. So this pursuit of happiness, which is very much the kind of conditioning we have at this time in this place, Western world, for many of us tuning in, we're encouraged, you know, to find happiness in the transient, to find happiness in that which doesn't last. It's a dilemma. It's disappointing. It's a shame, actually, that we have this kind of education. So how do we find our happiness? Well, thankfully, many spiritual traditions, and particularly clearly in the teachings of the Buddha, you know, we're given the guidance how to find happiness here. And it's paradoxical, isn't it? We learn from the Buddha's teachings that, sure, happiness cannot really be found in material things. Happiness cannot really be found in a lasting way in the material world. Happiness is to be found, perhaps we could say, as a kind of a byproduct of path. If we seek happiness, if we're pursuing happiness, it's very elusive. We may grasp happiness for a moment when we get what we want, but very quickly, I'm sure you've all noticed, I certainly notice this like regularly, I get something that I've really wanted to have in the way of something I've looked forward to, something I enjoy, and I'll get that thing. And very quickly, that happiness fades. It becomes somewhat jaded. I can't sustain the happiness of getting what's wanted, of getting what's enjoyable, of getting what essentially creates pleasant feeling here. That happiness is so transient. Actually, there's more happiness in wanting than there is in getting. If we really pay attention, isn't it? When we're looking forward to something, something's coming to us that's pleasant for us, that's enjoyable for us. There's the happiness in the wanting of that thing before that thing arrives is often the greatest little piece of happiness we can experience around any kind of material acquisition. As soon as we get it, yeah, it's okay. You know, the happiness cannot be sustained. And the mind, of course, that's programmed, or the lack of wisdom that inclines us to seeking happiness in worldly things, in worldly experiences, you know, this will then compel us to, isn't it, seek the next thing, seek something else. I've got what I want. Well, yeah, it's okay. What else can I find that will give me some happiness? How else can I get that rush, that crescendo of happiness, of joy? So, yeah, these worldly ways of seeking happiness, the Buddha's really encouraging us to see through, to see before we immerse ourselves in this way of living, to recognize, wake up to the impossibility of lasting happiness in samsara, in the material realm. So these bodies that are, you know, very much inclined towards pleasant feeling and reject, want to move away from, get rid of unpleasant feeling, we can then relate to, rather than as kind of victims of these desires and these ways of feeling averse, we can start to relate to this body and feelings as our teacher, as our Dharma teacher. So we can see the waves of desire and aversion arising and falling when we meditate. And we're not acting on desire, we're not acting on aversion. And we can start to appreciate this is anicca, changing. So just as happiness, material happiness, changes so quickly, so also, thankfully, does the desire and aversion. The desire and aversion are always around seeking happiness, seeking well-being. And this seeking also has the quality of arising and passing, arising and passing. And then we start to free up a little. We start to become quite masterful, rather than being a victim of desires, of this body, of these feelings, of this mind that's seeking happiness. We start to become the master, the one who observes, the one who sees nature and how it plays out, and how this searching for happiness is doomed to failure, and how we don't have to engage in it. We don't have to be ignorant around the conditioning that we have. We can wake up and see and learn how desire and aversion flow, like everything else, arise and pass. Arise, maybe really impact the mind for some time, and then fade away. Just as worldly happiness fades, so do worldly desires fade. And we can watch from this masterful vantage point of mindfulness. We can see the process. And then, friends, there's an inkling of what true happiness can be, of what true joy actually is, where it springs from. It springs from letting go. It springs from not falling for the snares of Mara, the snares of delusion, of ignorance. It springs from standing back and, rather than flowing with desire and aversion, observing them, getting to know them, getting to know the nature here. We become very empowered then. We don't have to follow our desires. We can learn about this process, and we can notice something like a spaciousness, a freedom, liberation from desire. And of course, this is the core of the Buddha's teaching. So he's directing us happiness seekers, us joy seekers, to find our happiness where it's truly to be found. And it's so not what we would think as we're growing up, or as we're pursuing, the worldly agenda. Wealth, success, status, possessions. When we are encouraged to recognize the futility of the search for happiness in worldly things, then we can begin to notice the happiness in letting go, relinquishment, giving away, giving up on the search for success or wealth or worldly happiness, giving up on that. It's a relief, isn't it, to recognize that we don't have to strive in these ways. We can turn our energy, turn our attention towards the beneficial striving, the striving to let go of suffering. And it's all aided by mindfulness, developing awareness. And then we know, as we develop mindfulness, we get some wisdom coming in. We start to recognize how to direct our attention in skillful ways. How to direct our attention in skillful ways. Directing our attention to the ways in which defilements arise and the ways in which we can let go of suffering. Directing our attention towards skillful behavior, skillful action around letting go, around harmlessness, and seeing how when we act in ways that are harmful or grasping, holding, relishing and cherishing worldly things, that actually clearly leads to suffering for us. Because everything that is not given is lost. We're going to lose everything, all of it. It's all going. And if we bring in this attitude, recognize that all phenomena are fading away, coming to cessation, then it's easy for us to let go. And slowly but surely we learn in the letting go, not because we're seeking happiness, not because we're seeking joy, but in the letting go, there is joy, there is well-being, there is safety. It's a refuge for us. And so the path as taught by the Buddha, the Eightfold Noble Path, is the path of joy. It's the way to joy. And it's not because we're seeking joy. It's because we're following the path. It's because we're learning to not hold on to the things that cause suffering and to adhere to the attitude that brings well-being through letting go, through relinquishment. In Thailand, they talk a lot about these three aspects of practice: dana, sila, bhavana. And this is a really wonderful model way of expressing the Buddha's teachings, expressing the path for joy. It brings well-being to practice dana, sila, bhavana. Just that. Dana, the giving, the mentality of relinquishing, letting go, we can channel into giving for, sharing, and how much joy this brings. And so in many monasteries in Thailand where I practice, there's such a clear directive, such a encouragement to developing the attitude of serving. Why would I want to spend my time thinking about myself and what I need and what I want? How much more joyful it is to open the heart to community and to see where I can support, help, give, and how much happiness there is to be found in this shift of attitude. This shift of attitude is not to neglect ourselves. It's not to put our needs aside and ignore them. Not at all, because we're part of the community. We're part of the collective, wherever we are, in whatever situation. So this one, is part of that. What we're giving is to this one also. But giving our attention, giving our kindness, giving our harmlessness, giving our friendship, giving our material goods that we're going to lose anyway. To give is to kind of almost in a way keep what we have, the good that we have, in terms of giving away material things. For me, it's like an absolute bonus that we're going to lose them anyway, so we can give them away before they're lost. Somehow, when we have this attitude of giving and sharing, we get to keep what? We get to keep that wealth, the true wealth there, which is the wealth of well-being that we can appreciate around the good things that we have, to really make the very most of them. Let's give them away, or let's share them. If we need to keep some for ourselves, we can share them. So this kind of attitude, it may sound very idealistic or unrealistic. It may sound like, well, yeah, but I have to have this house, car, food. I have to have all these things. And it's true that, of course, it behooves us to take care of this one and to make sure that we have what we need. But we generally have so much more, friends. And then we have the opportunity to be open-handed, open-hearted, and to practice dana. And when we do this, path grows. We develop in dharma. We receive, as an almost byproduct, great joy from giving, but also it inclines the mind toward freedom, towards letting go. To give is to let go. And if we practice this in a material way, then it helps us to let go of the more sticky aspects of our experience, to let go of the defilements, to let go of our inclinations, habits, to let go of our views and opinions and our sense of knowing anything at all. To let go of all of these things is much harder. If we practice dana materially, giving away material things, giving away wealth, sharing what we have, then the mind will incline joyfully towards the letting go that's required for us to really experience peace and well-being. And that is all of the mental baggage that we carry. Let's be very open-handed with that too. I don't mean share your mental defilements with others. We keep those to ourselves and learn how to let go of them internally, but to share our kindness, to share our time, to share our energy, to share our goodness with others. And so we grow in good qualities, both physical, bodily, material, giving, and then the mental, the heart, the emotional, the generosity of heart. These things are to be developed. Dana, sila, bhavana. Dana often relates to physically giving, giving things, giving wealth, giving possessions, giving food, giving water, giving space. Sila is the great gift of goodness that we can also share widely and see how joy and happiness grow from practicing sila. So to be harmless in this world, to be a source of safety for others, a person with whom others can relax and feel at ease, because they know we're not going to harm them, we're not going to take anything from them, we're not going to treat them sexually in any kind of a disrespectful way whatsoever. We're not going to lie to others. We're not going to get intoxicated and cause mayhem and havoc in that way. So we're safe, and we're giving the gift of safety, the gift of harmlessness to others. And again, this is not something that we do because we're seeking happiness and joy. It's something that we do because we know it's the right thing to do. We know it's for our well-being. We know it's to help us to move away from suffering. It helps us to move away from remorse, from agitation when we live a harmless life. But of course, the natural result of this is the growth of happiness and joy. These things will flourish when we live a harmless life, these qualities and these goals of our life. This pleasure seeking is really happiness seeking. And when we let go of the pleasure seeking that's doomed to frustration and focus more on what really creates happiness here through practicing these teachings, then we can really rest in happiness. And there's a joyful quality that's kind of in the background. It's just there for us. And when we're lacking in joy, lacking in happiness, we're feeling despondent, we're feeling disillusioned, even feeling despair, hopelessness, grief, great sadness, when life is not a happy experience for us in any moment. As practitioners, we know what to do. Dana, sila, bhavana. Give. Give a gift. Find ways to help others. And we're immediately empowered. And there's immediately happiness for us there. Practice sila. Consider how we can develop our virtue as a source of happiness for us. And bhavana. Whenever we're feeling a lack of happiness and well-being, let's practice. Let's bring the attention here and see the suffering and pay attention kindly, patiently, compassionately, and see what happens to that suffering. Of practice is a way of joy, and the real happiness that we find on the path of practice, that's inevitable really on this path of practice, is the happiness that's not through getting what we want or acquiring things or any kind of worldly pleasure whatsoever. The happiness that comes is through letting go. It's through relinquishing. It's through sharing. It's through giving. So let's consider these words and consider the real sources of joy and happiness, and see how we can appreciate the happiness that comes from giving, from goodness, and from path, from practice. Ewan. So yeah, thank you for joining the live stream. Those who are here present in this moment, wherever you are in the world. And I'm going to have a look and see if there's any questions or reflections on this topic or any Dharma topic. Christopher has a comment here for us. Thank you, Christopher. He says, even happiness itself is also impermanent. In that sense, those gods in the sensual heavens are also impermanent. Only Nibbana is permanent. Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, beautifully said. There is no permanent happiness to be found in samsara. And we have, many accounts of beings in the heavenly realms who fall into the delusion, which maybe we could say we may also have, that they are somehow permanent. This life is permanent, everlasting. It's actually quite easy for us to fall into this delusion also. We can simply forget old age, sickness, and death when things are going well for us. Just put them aside, just ignore them, neglect this reality, and then suffer like hell when it comes and hits us in the face. This is why it's really helpful, friends, isn't it, to contemplate these heavenly messengers of sickness, aging, and death, so that they're here for us. We're awake to these realities, because then it gives us the impetus, gives us the encouragement to practice this path for liberation, to step off the wheel of suffering. Well, the Brahmas, the Devas have a harder time waking up to mortality because their lifespans are so long. To be a god in the heavens, the lifespan is almost eternal, almost everlasting, but actually it isn't. And we can see in the Pali Canon there are many accounts of heavenly beings who are very shocked, very horrified and appalled when their experience starts to change. There are descriptions of the Devas who are always comfortable physically. They have very, ephemeral bodies, very subtle form, and always comfortable, always this well-being physically. But when it comes to the end of the lifespan, when it eventually arrives, very quickly the physical experience changes. They start to notice discomfort. And it's shocking, it's horrifying. And then there's the fall from grace, inevitably, most often, when the karma that has led to a heavenly rebirth comes to an end. What are the possibilities for the next rebirth? Generally, it's down somewhere, to a less comfortable, a less blissful, a less heavenly experience. And so this is very shocking. And perhaps we can relate to this. Perhaps we can relate to this in our own experience. Certainly we will have experienced this in previous births. We may not remember, but this fall from grace, this shocking end, is perhaps something we can relate to, and something therefore that we want to avoid. We don't want to delude ourselves. We don't want to fall into the vipallasa, these contortions of reality, which are, unfortunately, these vipallasa are states of mind that we fall into very easily. That is the belief in permanence, the belief in that there's a pleasant abiding to be found here, lasting and pleasant. The belief in self, that there is something here that is lasting in some way. There's some aspect of this experience that is eternal. And these vipallasa, these distortions of view, are a cause of great suffering, because eventually the bubble gets burst, doesn't it? And we can be shocked and traumatized if we're not ready for that. And so, thank you, Christopher. It's good for all of us and for all beings everywhere, in every state of existence, to wake up, to change, to anicca, to impermanence, because it's the truth of existence. It is the reality here. And there is only the only happiness that is reliable and lasting is the happiness of letting go. That is leading us to the ultimate peace and well-being, that is nibbana, the call, no longer seeking, no longer searching, having let go of all the sources of suffering, all kinds of desire, all kinds of aversion, all kinds of confusion. Can we even call this happiness? Are there words that can describe this? Peace. It's not the happiness that we would understand until we have reached that point, until we have come to that place of freedom, because our search for happiness is tainted by ignorance. So all we can do, really, friends, isn't it, is follow our joy, follow path, follow wise seeking for happiness, the seeking that manifests as letting go, and see where it takes us. And then our understanding of happiness, our appreciation of what joy truly is, can begin to manifest and clarify, and we can incline towards ever greater happiness and well-being. But it may not be the same as the happiness that we imagine. The real happiness perhaps is something that can't really be put into words. But I really appreciate this, Christopher. Yeah, even happiness is impermanent. Only nibbana is permanent. Sadhu. Yeah, Christopher was saying even the Brahma realm, that happiness is also impermanent. Absolutely. Okay, I have a comment here from Nico. Loosening the grip of craving. Thank you, Nico. Loosening the grip of craving. How does one cultivate renunciation? The internal process, Satipatthana and Eightfold Path. You said shift of attitude. Yes, thank you, Nico. How to cultivate renunciation. And this is, it can feel really challenging for us to be invited to let go, to give away, to relinquish the things that we enjoy, perhaps, can feel quite not so joyful. It's like, but those things do make me happy for a while anyway. So it can be something that requires a degree, perhaps, of faith saddha, of willingness to give credence to the teachings of the Buddha, to hear his words. Yes, renunciation is a parami, it's a virtue, and it's something we want to cultivate as part of right intention. To practice the Eightfold Path factor of right intention, the Buddha says right intention is to be willing to renounce, to let go. And then, having taken on these teachings with some degree of confidence in these teachings, we can put them into practice and see what happens, see what the result is. So if I give away something I like to another person, let's see how that feels. When I let go of some desire and just try to not incline towards getting that thing that I want, how does that feel? And initially, these things may feel quite painful. It can be jarring and like, actually, I do want that thing. I don't want to give it away. I don't want to share it even. It can feel jarring, and we can feel the pinch of not getting what we want, not allowing ourselves to incline towards getting what we want. There can be discomfort. It can feel painful. But then, over time and with practice, we can start to recognize there's a delicious feeling. There's a very lovely sense of perhaps self-regard, self-esteem, spaciousness. When I don't get what I want and I just stay steady and present, time expands, space expands. There's a sense of being a kind of master of the mind. The mind isn't throwing me around anymore. I'm able to observe this arising of desire, feel the discomfort of not moving towards getting what I want, and then start to notice how that desire will fade away. And in its wake, what's left is something so much more precious, so much more restful, peaceful, joyful than that getting, than that acquisition, than that momentary relishing of the thing that I want, that so swiftly fades also away. Fleeting pleasures become less attractive to us as we develop a renunciation practice. We can see how fleeting they are, and the real well-being that starts to develop, starts to grow within us as we notice the beautiful rewards of renunciation. This is something we can find out for ourselves. And it's a loosening of the grip of craving. It's a gradual process. And it's like, as we loosen the grip, it's like there's a relaxation. There's a relief. So these are experiences that we have as we practice these teachings, and practicing right intention, willingness to renounce, willingness to let go. We can start to reap the benefits, friends. And indeed, Nico, this process involves satipatthana, mindfulness, paying attention, yes, to the body, to feelings, to the mind, the state of mind, the heart, and to the ways in which we think. Paying attention enables us to see these processes and to chart our course towards Nibbana through these experiences. And yeah, it's a shift of attitude. It's a shift of attitude, the kind of natural inclination to have and to hold what I want, what I love, what I feel is going to bring happiness, to recognizing this doesn't work. And it's like the reverse process. It's like, let it go, share, give, open heart, open hands. this is the way to freedom. This is the way to peace. Oh, this is the way to happiness. Yeah, it's a shift of attitude. Thank you, Nico. Okay, Andrew says, thank you, Andrew. I've heard that cultivating joy during meditation helps to collect the mind into samadhi. How can I learn to let go of the need for niramasa sukha and yet cultivate this joy in meditation? Yeah. So how to find this way to peace? Letting go, again, let go of the sukha as it arises. Any source of happiness, just like any source of unhappiness, any source of agitation or discomfort. In the same way, any source of comfort, of well-being, of happiness, all of these experiences, if we can have the attitude of letting go, give it away, give it out, let it flow through, then we start to appreciate a truer happiness, which is a more peaceful, I could say, contentment. So whether it's pleasant or unpleasant experience, whether there's happiness or sadness, happiness or pain, all experience, if we can have this attitude of letting it go, watching it arise, watching it pass. Yes, the happiness will always arise and pass. It will never last. Also pain and suffering, always arising, passing, arising and passing. And as we get really good at seeing this flow of experience, then it becomes possible for us to rest in the joy of this wisdom, the joy of being the knower, the joy of kind of stepping back from experience, the joy of insight. So this, in our meditation, we can cultivate this joy, and this joy will incline us, yes, towards samadhi, towards peace, towards stillness, redirecting our attention towards the mind that is free from suffering, redirecting our attention from the defilements, the obscurations, towards the clarity of this mind, this heart that sees, the Dhamma, to be the Buddha seeing the Dhamma. This is what we can cultivate in our meditation. And it really helps. It helps to collect the mind into stillness, into samadhi, and samadhi, this cultivation of the path factor of samadhi, of stillness, helps us to apply attention skillfully to experience and not to fall into the old trap of pursuing pleasure in worldly ways, but to step back from that and to practice letting go ever more deeply, ever more fully. Thank you very much, Andrew, for your comment and your question. Dan Jones, thank you, Dan. Dan says, I heard my friend use an expression the other day. I love it. As we find joy in doing good and not senses, it's an upward merit spiral here. That's so beautifully put. I could just have that image, and that image will stay with me. Thank you very much. And Richard says, it's always a great, thank you, Richard. Glad you're enjoying the talk. That's lovely. And yes, thank you, Scott. Scott says, please hold in your heart. Let's hold in our hearts those with extreme mental suffering. Yes, absolutely. We're all, in a way, experiencing mental suffering until we're fully liberated. And yet we have the degree of mental health that we're sitting here sharing on Dharma together. And there are so many beings who have such extremes of mental suffering that they are quite lost and reeling around in suffering from one difficulty to another. And yes, we can surely consider this and feel and allow and share the compassion that arises. We are so blessed, and so many beings are struggling and suffering without any kind of way of quenching their thirst for happiness, thirst for well-being. And we have the Buddha's teachings, we have the source, the wellspring to quench our thirst. And this is something to be super grateful for, and also to remember all those who are struggling and suffering with great compassion. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I appreciate your comment very much, Scott. Okay, and Kit, thank you, Kit, says, I really had to exert some self-control to keep listening to this topic this morning. My mind really was not in the mood to hear about mortality. It was interesting to write that out. Thank you very much for sharing this experience, Kit. It's beautiful to hear how it is for each other. And yeah, I thought you were going to say actually that it was difficult to hear about joy, because sometimes when we're really struggling and suffering, we've had a blow, we've had a difficulty, we've just lost a beloved relative, we can feel actually this is not a joyful moment for me. I'm just steeped in sadness, steeped in suffering at this point. This is not something I need to hear about right now. And that's completely understandable. There are times when it really behooves us to just pay attention to the suffering that's here and stay with it and let the tears flow and let the pain express. And there's no joy in these moments, and that's fine. Actually, I would say there is a little joy in these moments, even when we're suffering very much, we're very, very much in grief and sadness. There is the joy of being aware, of being present for whatever we feel. And I think many of you will appreciate this, that there is the joy of mindfulness, there is the joy of path. We're practicing. We kind of know how to relate to suffering, and there's a joy in that. So I'd say even in those moments there can be happiness, but we don't necessarily want to incline towards thinking and speaking about joy. We just want to be present for our suffering at times. But in fact here, Kit, yeah, it's the mortality that you were not wishing to dwell upon. And yeah, it's a sobering, I would also say peaceful and calming reflection, Maranasati, to contemplate death, to remember that we're all on death row here. We're all doomed on that level of this physical form's mortality. And, it is a aspect of reality that we naturally tend to incline away from, especially when we're young. Young people do not want to hear or think or speak about death. They don't want to know, because they're full of life. There's this vitality, so strong, and everything kind of, so much life to be lived. There's almost a shying away from the idea, the reality of death in youth. And yet, it's very helpful, even with young people, to encourage an awareness, because for many young people, there will have been death in their lives, there will have been loss, or, a lot of young people have lost somebody close to them, and it's very lonely if all the others around you are completely oblivious to this kind of suffering. And it's very helpful for young people, if they've lost a loved one, to be able to speak about it, to be able to appreciate that this is an experience we all have, that they're not alone. So even in young people, I think Maranasati is something not to neglect, but for all of us, to come into the way of practice is to consider this too. And actually, it really helps us to, I feel, to live, to appreciate death is to appreciate life. And it's difficult to really appreciate the opportunity we have here without this appreciation of its very transient nature. But I hear you, and I'm really glad that you didn't kind of switch off and disappear, but you just stayed with the arising of this kind of not wanting to hear about death in this particular moment, friend, and that you stayed with the topic, and then that you also shared this reflection with us. Sometimes, friends, we hear Dharma talk and it can bring up a lot of aversion for us. How skillful to recognize that, okay, this is an opportunity to, it's like all of our practice, isn't it? Is not anymore turning away from suffering, but rather getting really interested in suffering and turning our attention to that suffering. So to sit through a Dharma talk and feel the aversion, discomfort, what a gift. Sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for your practice, Kit. Okay, just scrolling through. Thank you for your kind comments, everybody. Just seeing if there's any more questions or reflections. We've just got one more. How perfect. Just coming to the end of the hour. I'll finish with Amarantha. Amarantha, thank you for your comment. The lack of self-affection makes us feel the necessity to fit. This desire takes us to desire to have a life, bad things, and craving grows and grows. I started to stop this thanks to the Dharma. Thank you so much, Amarantha. I really hear what you're expressing. I think this way in which we tend to be, compelled really to go along with the worldly stream, the worldly aims and values. And it's really hard actually to, first of all, recognize that these are not necessarily Dharma values. This is not necessarily in our best interest. These worldly aims and values do not necessarily lead us to happiness or well-being, and to kind of be willing to do something different, to step away from all of that. And oftentimes people do all the right things in terms of the worldly messages and teachings and the societal values. They do all the right things. You know, they work hard, they get this, that, and the other, they have the family, they do the right things in society, and yet there can be a feeling of something's missing. This isn't kind of ticking all the boxes. I'm not actually feeling satisfied. I don't actually feel that happy. Maybe even I feel despair. What is the point? What is the purpose of all of that? What is this emptiness in the heart? And then we get old, we get sick, and we pass away, and we're not resourced to deal with skillfully these natural arisings. So I really appreciate your comment, and I just again feel such a thankfulness that we have the Dharma stream as an alternative to the worldly aims and values. We have the path and the aims and values inclining us towards Nibbana, and how wonderful to actually have some meaningful valuable, realistic guidance in this life, and to know how to live and to know how to direct our lives for freedom, for Nibbana. What a blessing. So, dear friends, we can finish now this session. Let's close with 3 sadhus in joyful appreciation for the Buddha's teachings. Sadhu, 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 anumodami. Just to mention, I won't be here for the next 2 weeks for this Wednesday session. I'm going to be away. And actually next week, I'm going to be joining Ayya Soma in Italy, which I'm very thrilled to be able to spend a little bit of time with her. So she's over in Italy, as many of you know, raising funds and generating support and interest in this wonderful possibility of a monastery, forest monastery, down in the south of Italy in Apulia. So please listen out for news of this. They have a website also, and it's connected to the Buddhist Insights website, and fundraising is going on for this wonderful project. So I'm really looking forward to going down and perhaps seeing the site of the new monastery, the possible site, but there's still a process of fundraising. So please consider generous offerings for this project and supporting Ayya Soma. So I'm going to go down and hopefully be support to her and share with some teaching, various communities, various groups down there. And so I'll be back in 3 weeks' time for this live stream. Thank you. Take care, everyone.